Chapter 1. Early in the morning, the air was still a little chilly. A breeze blew down from the sky, brushing past the buildings toward the center of Magnolia Town. A window curtain on a rather luxurious building facing the street swayed back and forth. Although it was a little chilly, it gave people a refreshing feeling unique to the early morning. Gotcha! With an extremely soft sound, the half-covered window was opened by someone. A youth of about 11 or 12 years of age, with short black hair and a pair of dark pupils as deep as the stars, stood by the window and looked at the bustling street outside. He stretched lazily, but soon after, he trembled slightly. Ugh! It's a little cold. Feeling the chill on his body along with the morning breeze, Noah resisted the urge to turn back and crawl back into bed to sleep. Instead, he closed the curtains. This was the Fairy Tale Guild. In the kingdom of Fiori, where magic was deeply embedded in people's lives, it could be said that it was the cradle of archmages who used magic to make a living. There were countless archmages who belonged to different guilds and accepted other people's requests to complete the tasks they were entrusted with. It was the same for the Archmage Guild. As for Fairy Tale, it was just one of the many guilds that were as dense as a jungle. However, it was one of the most famous guilds in the game. Now, the place where Noah lived was the Fairy Tale Guild. As the guild's usual gathering place and the headquarters for accepting tasks and requests, the Fairy Tale Guild was almost uninhabited. Even the guild's president, Makarov Doria, had to find another place to live. However, as Makarov's adopted grandson, ever since he was adopted by Makarov, Noah had been living here for a year. Of course, it wasn't that Noah didn't like living with Makarov. The reason why he lived in the Fairy Tale Guild was very complicated. In general, Noah was quite satisfied with his current residence. After closing the curtains, Noah looked out of the window. Noah's room was on the top floor of the guild, so standing in front of the window, he could almost see half of the Villa Magnolia where the Fairy Tale Guild was located. Early in the morning, there were many townspeople on the streets preparing for a day's work. Some were busy opening shops, some were moving some goods. It was very lively. Looking at this scene, Noah's heart was surprisingly calm. He didn't know what to think, but he softly muttered, "Gray should be here soon." As soon as his voice fell, Noah's door was knocked on by a loud and unceremonious knock, causing it to vibrate. "Hey! Noah! Wake up!" Listening to the impatient and rude knocking on the door, Noah could not help but smile. He turned around, grabbed a coat that was placed on the head of the bed, and put it on himself. His gaze inadvertently turned to the back of his right hand and fixed on it. Looking carefully, on the back of Noah's right hand, there was a bird-like tattoo. That was the Fairy Tale Guild's coat of arms. If one had the guild's coat of arms, it meant that one was a magic shooter of the guild. Fairy Tale was the #1 magic guide guild in the Fiori Kingdom. As a member of this guild, no one would feel dishonored. However, Noah looked at the coat of arms on the back of his hand and showed an extremely complicated expression. Finally, he sighed and calmed his emotions. He walked to the door and opened it. What entered Noah's eyes was a young man about the same age as him. He had the same short black hair, but it wasn't as refined and smooth as Noah's. Instead, it was a little rebellious and stuck up. He was only wearing a pair of shorts, and other than that, the young boy stood outside the door with an impatient expression. "If you don't open the door, I really want to kick it down." Hearing this, Noah's face didn't darken because of the other party's extremely unpleasant words. Instead, he smiled helplessly. Gray Falpasta, this was the name of the young boy in front of him. Although he was about the same age as Noah, he had joined Fairy Tale 2 years earlier than Noah and could be considered Noah's senior. Although he was a senior, at his age, he naturally couldn't be a mature magic shooter. Currently, he was still in the state of practicing magic and was working hard to become a mature magic shooter. Therefore, he could be considered the same as Noah. Although he had joined Fairy Tale, he hadn't reached the stage where he could accept a commission and go out to work. It was also because of this that Noah and Gray often interacted. His relationship with Noah could be considered the best in the entire Fairy Tale. This could be seen from the other party's impatient expression, but he still went to Noah's room to call for him every day. So energetic early in the morning, Gray, Noah said with slight annoyance. Gray, on the other hand, walked into his room without a care in the world. You're too lazy. I had already practiced for an hour before coming to the guild. You haven't even learned magic, yet you're only up now. In response to Gray's harsh words, Noah didn't deny this fact. Instead, he shrugged his shoulders indifferently. After all, Gray wasn't wrong. As someone who couldn't accept a commission and go out to work, Gray couldn't be considered a mature magic shooter. Although he wasn't mature yet, he could already use magic. Even if the degree of his use of magic was still very immature, he could use magic and join the guild. Therefore, he could be called a magic shooter. As for the similarly immature Noah, who was the same age as Gray, he still couldn't use magic. He didn't even have the qualifications to be called a magic shooter. This was also the reason why Noah looked at his guild's coat of arms with a complicated expression. Only magic shooters could join the Magic Guide Guild. This was common knowledge among common sense. But Noah joined Fairy Tale when he couldn't use magic, and even imprinted the guild's coat of arms that belonged to Fairy Tale. Even if the people in Fairy Tale weren't the kind of people who would gossip about others, Noah himself was somewhat concerned. I've always been very puzzled. Gray, who had walked into Noah's room, turned around and looked at him. Undoubtedly, the old man said that your magic is so strong that even he was surprised. Why can't you use magic? If I remember correctly, this is already the 11th time you've asked this question, right? Noah sighed slightly. Grandfather said that the magic in my body is too strong. If I can't control it freely and use magic carelessly, it will only bring about unimaginable disasters. So, before I can control the magic in my body freely, I'm temporarily forbidden from learning magic. Didn't I already tell you this? But are you really that strong? Gray sized up Noah with a face full of suspicion. I can't see it at all. Is that so? Noah rolled his eyes. Then do you want to ask grandfather yourself? Gray immediately shut up. Although he said so, and his heart was full of doubts, Gray still believed in Makarov's judgment. Since Makarov said so, then it must be so. There must be no mistake. All right, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's go down. It should be lively downstairs. Noah smiled and nodded, and walked downstairs with Gray. Chapter 2. The Fairy Tale Guild had a total of 3 floors. The first floor was where the members of the guild usually gathered, accepted the missions posted on the commission board, went out to work, participated in various guild activities, and chatted. It was quite similar to a tavern, and most guilds were more or less like this. The second floor was an empty space, and the layout was no different from a normal building. However, there was a commission board that was similar to the one on the first floor, and the missions posted on it were more difficult than the ones on the first floor. Only powerful magic shooters approved by the guild leader could enter. As for the third floor, it was originally used to store some of the guild's important items. It was only after Noah moved into the Fairy Tale Guild that one of the rooms on the third floor was tidied up for Noah to live in. In other words, without Noah, the third floor of the Fairy Tale Guild would be the least visited place. Even now, people would only go up when they needed Noah's help. The person who went up most often was Gray, but of course, he didn't stay for long. The two of them went down the stairs from the third floor, and when they passed by the second floor, they curiously looked inside, but all they could see was an empty floor. Today, in the entire Fairy Tale Guild, there were only 1 or 2 people who were approved by the guild leader to enter the second floor to accept missions. Naturally, it wasn't that easy to see people on this floor. "Hey, Noah." Gray didn't know if it was because of his curiosity, but he was eager to try. "I heard from my companions in the guild that the missions on the second floor are terrifying missions that only super powerful magic shooters can accept. We pass by here every day, shouldn't we? Don't even think about it." Noah, who had already guessed what Gray would say from his expression, interrupted him without hesitation. "When I first moved into the third floor of the guild, Grandpa used a very scary expression to warn me that when I passed by the second floor, I must not go inside, or else I would be expelled from the guild." Expelled from the guild. Even someone as bold as Gray was taken aback by this. "I'm just going in to take a look. Is there a need to punish me so severely?" "I don't know either." Noah shook his head. "But Grandpa usually dotes on me a lot, and he's never been so fierce to me. Other than warning me that I can't learn magic before I can freely control my own magic, that's the only time he did that. So, it's better if we don't go in." Tisk. Gray pursed his lips, but the eagerness on his face had completely disappeared. "Even if I can't go in now, sooner or later, I will. As long as you can get Grandfather's approval, you can enter the second floor." Noah nodded heavily. "Sooner or later, I'll go in as well." An immature magic shooter who was still in the state of practicing magic and an inexperienced magic shooter who didn't even know a single spell made a promise to each other at this time that even outstanding magic shooters wouldn't dare to make easily. Should it be said that the newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger? Or was it just a brat's nonsense? The two people involved had a determined expression on their faces. They smiled at each other and no longer paid attention to the second floor. They chatted intermittently as they walked towards the first floor. Wah! When Noah and Gray arrived at the first floor, a loud noise immediately entered their ears. At this time, the sun had just risen, but there were already a lot of magic shooters who had come to the guild, Fairy Tale. Some of them were sitting in front of wooden tables, drinking and bragging, while others were walking towards the commission board, ready to accept missions and go out to work. As the grandson of the guild leader of Fairy Tale and having lived in the guild for a year, the people in the guild were already very familiar with Noah. Once they saw Noah coming down from upstairs, they all greeted him. "Yo! Noah! You're finally up. You're a bit later than usual today. Don't tell me you wet the bed." Ha ha ha. Facing the teasing of his companions in the guild, Noah had a helpless expression on his face, but he also started to respond. He liked this lively atmosphere that gave him a sense of closeness. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen to live in the guild. However, Noah could calmly respond to the people in the guild, but that didn't mean that Gray could do the same. "Hey! You guys! Don't you see me?" Gray jumped out and pointed at everyone in the guild with blue veins on his forehead. "Undoubtedly, I'm here too. Why do you only greet Noah every time?" Hearing this, the guild members burst into laughter. "Before that, Gray, go put on some clothes first." Oh. Gray just realized that he was only wearing a pair of shorts. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but laugh out loud. Although they were playmates of the same age, and as a child who was only 11 or 12 years old, being able to use magic at this age was already very impressive. However, Gray had a hobby that made others unable to restrain their laughter exhibitionism. Therefore, Gray would often unknowingly run around naked. This was also the reason why Noah was so indifferent when he saw Gray dressed like this. Just as everyone in the guild was messing around with Gray, Noah's gaze couldn't help but turn towards a wooden table in the corner of the guild. There was a young girl who was about the same age as Noah and Gray. She was a little girl who didn't fit in with the lively atmosphere in the guild. The young girl had a head of bright red hair. Although her small face was very young, it was very delicate and very cute. However, it was this very cute young girl who not only wore an ice-cold armor that didn't match her appearance, but also had a medical eye patch over one of her eyes. She sat there alone and didn't speak to anyone, as if she was deliberately isolating herself from the people around her as she ate silently. The young girl's name was Alusha Shukalito. Noah didn't know much about this young girl named Alusha. He only knew that she joined Fairy's Tale after he joined. However, after joining Fairy's Tale, Alusha had always maintained this state. She didn't speak to anyone and didn't interact with anyone at all. Other than the few times she talked to the guild leader, Makarov, she didn't interact with anyone else. This was a young girl with a story. This was Noah's first impression of Alusha, and his only impression of her so far. Looking at the young girl sitting there silently eating, she didn't seem to be the lively scene of the guild at all. Noah hesitated for a moment before walking towards the direction of the guild's bar that provided wine and food. While Alusha was silently eating, a hand suddenly appeared in front of her and placed a plate of cheesecake in front of her before disappearing. Alusha frowned slightly and raised her head to look in front of her. In the end, she could only see a figure of about the same size as her. However, it seemed to be very broad and thick as it walked towards the guild's entrance. Then, it walked straight out of the guild and disappeared from her sight. Alusha stared blankly at the guild's entrance and blankly looked at the cheesecake in front of her. After a while, she reached out with the fork in her hand and cut a small piece of the cheesecake and put it into her mouth. After a long time, a sound that only Alusha could hear came out from her mouth. So sweet. Chapter 3. Not far from the Fairy Tale Guild, at the edge of Villa Magnolia, there were a lot of mountainous forests. These mountainous forests were not ordinary places, they were really dangerous places for ordinary people. In these mountainous forests, there were many medicinal herbs with special effects. As long as an ordinary person could obtain one or two of them, it was possible for them to become rich. However, no ordinary person dared to enter these places recklessly to pick medicinal herbs. The reason was very simple. In this place, other than the various herbs with strange effects, there were also some ferocious magical creatures. They were not wild beasts, but real magical creatures. A year ago, Noah encountered a terrifying giant wolf that was at least 2 meters tall. It was a magical creature that ordinary people could not deal with. Only those magic shooters who had magic could enter and leave at will. As the leading magic guide guild in the entire Fiori Kingdom, Fairy Tale was built so close to these dangerous places. Naturally, there would be many members of the guild who would frequently enter these places, either to pick herbs or to hunt down magical creatures that ordinary people could not deal with or to complete some missions. Although Noah was still young, ever since he was adopted by Makarov and joined Fairy Tale, he had entered these dangerous places at least 10 times under the leadership of Makarov or some of the magic shooters in the guild. He did not dare to say that he knew the environment like the back of his hand, but as long as he did not go too deep, he would not become a headless fly that would wander around aimlessly. In the past, he had entered these dangerous places under the leadership of Makarov or some of the magic shooters in the guild. Now that he was alone and had not learned magic, Noah naturally did not dare to go too deep. When he reached a small river at the edge of a forest, he stopped and did not move forward. Phew! Gently exhaling a breath of white air, Noah put his hand into his pocket and took out thumb-sized beads. If one looked carefully, they would discover that these thumb-sized beads had a layer of fluorescence that was hard to detect with the naked eye. After taking out a large number of beads from his pocket, Noah did not hesitate and threw all the beads in his hand into the sky. Swish swish. A moment later, a large number of beads that covered Noah's vision fell from the sky like a torrential rain. Looking at the beads that poured down like a torrential rain, Noah reflexively took a step back. Then, with a move of his mind, an extremely vigorous energy turned into a substantial light and burst out from Noah's small body like a storm. Whang! A vigorous energy rippled out like a storm and swept towards the pearls that were falling from the sky. It was like a gentle palm that gently lifted the pearls that were falling from the sky. However, when the first bead, which was only the size of a thumb, was lifted, Noah felt a slight burden. It was as if a sandbag was suddenly pressed on his shoulder, causing his heart to tremble. However, Noah had already experienced this kind of burden countless times in the 1 year that he had joined Fairy's Tale. Naturally, he would not panic because of this. Instead, he calmed down a lot. The mana in his body surged out continuously, bringing about a low vibration sound. He used pure mana to lift the beads that were falling from the sky, allowing them to float beside him. 1 bead. 2 beads. 3 beads. 4 beads. As the number of beads being lifted increased, Noah's expression gradually turned grave. He furrowed his brows slightly, and even the muscles on his body tensed up a lot. The mana that was surging out of his body became more and more violent, and it was as terrifying as a storm. If there was a magic shooter here and felt the mana that was surging out of Noah's body, he would definitely be shocked. Because the mana that was surging out of Noah's body was already more than a dozen times stronger than that of an ordinary magic shooter. This level of mana, even if placed in the Fairy's Tale, which was full of outstanding magic shooters, it could be ranked in the top 3. And under such circumstances, Noah was still constantly releasing his mana, making it stronger and stronger. Seeing that Noah was only a little heavy, but his face was not red, and he was not panting, it was obvious that this level of mana was not even 1/10 of Noah's limit. Using this level of mana, let alone lifting up some thumb-sized beads, it was more than enough to lift up a huge rock that was as tall as a person. However, when Noah used his own mana to lift up the 111th bead, that bead only paused in the air for a moment, and then it penetrated the mana that was holding it up without slowing down and fell to the ground. The fall of this bead seemed to have caused a chain reaction, causing more and more beads to penetrate the mana that was holding it up. Some of the beads were directly bounced off the moment they came into contact with the mana, scattering in all directions. Dong 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 dong. Suddenly, the beads fell to the ground one after another, making a sound that only stopped after a long time. Phew. Exhaling once again, Noah looked at the beads floating around him. After counting them, his brows immediately relaxed, and he excitedly clenched his fist. 133 beads. 25 more beads than yesterday. My control of mana is getting better and better. Yes, everything Noah did was just to train his control of mana. These thumb-sized beads were not ordinary beads, but some magic tools that were extremely sensitive to the strength of mana. Each bead here had a different degree of repulsion to mana. If the same degree of mana was applied to these beads, the beads would be able to float in the air. If the applied mana was greater than the repulsion of the beads would be bounced off. Conversely, if the applied mana was less than the repulsion of the repulsion of the beads would directly disperse the mana, and the beads would fall. In other words, if Noah wanted to make the beads that he sprinkled into the sky float, not only did he have to determine the repulsive force of each bead when his mana came into contact with the beads, but he also had to make the strength of the mana released on the beads equal to the repulsive force of the beads in this short moment. Only then could the beads float. Relying on this training method, Noah's control of mana had improved to a shocking degree in a whole year. Such control of mana was superb for controlling mana that was more than 10 times stronger than the average magic shooter. But when it came to controlling the mana in Noah's body that even Makarov was shocked by, it was only at a level that was just right. At least, Noah's control of his own mana had reached a passing level not long ago, so that the mana in his body would not go out of control and go berserk. It must be known that in this year, Noah had many experiences of being too emotional and causing the mana in his body to go berserk, almost destroying the entire Fairy Tale Guild. Or rather, if not for Makarov, the Fairy Tale Guild would have to be rebuilt many times. At the thought of this, Noah's excitement of having taken a big step forward in his control of magic power also decreased a lot. He picked up the beads on the ground, and continued to train his control of magic power. Noah was looking forward to it. He was looking forward to the day when he could freely control his own mana. When that happened, Noah could start to come into contact with magic, and walk towards the path of becoming a magic shooter. But Noah did not notice that not far away, a short old man had been watching him while he was tirelessly training his control of mana. Chapter 4. The next morning, dong 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 dong. Noah, who was still asleep, was suddenly awakened by a series of loud knocks on his door. Before he could react, he heard Gray's voice. "Hey! Noah! Are you awake?" Noah couldn't help but frown as he looked at the door that was constantly shaking from the knocks. Gray wasn't the kind of person who would consider not disturbing someone's sleep. Usually, he would knock on the door rudely when he came to wake Noah up. However, Noah felt that today, Gray not only knocked harder, but his tone also sounded anxious. Could it be that something had happened? Just as this question appeared in Noah's mind, Gray's voice outside the door gave him the answer. "You bastard! Now is not the time to sleep. It's very lively downstairs. Hurry up and get up." Noah, who hurried downstairs with Gray, had just arrived on the first floor when he realized that the situation in the guild was different from usual. It was still lively, but the members of the guild had gathered around the mission board where the mission list was posted. The front of the mission board was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Is it this mission again? The client must have worked hard. Undoubtedly, this mission is very unpopular. That's not the case. Look, after the mission is completed, the reward will be much higher than before, right? That's true. In addition to these discussions, at the bar of the guild, there was an old man who was as short as a child and had a walking stick in his hand. He was dressed like a clown, and he looked very old. He was sitting cross-legged at the bar, casually drinking his wine. He was in stark contrast to the members of the guild. However, looking at the short old man sitting cross-legged at the bar, Noah revealed a look of joy. Grandfather. This person was none other than the guild leader of Fairy Tale, Makarov Dole. Makarov paused for a moment and turned his gaze to the staircase. He saw Noah standing there with a peaceful expression on his face. He smiled so widely that his eyes narrowed. "It's Noah. Are you up?" "Grandpa." Noah ran to Makarov. "You haven't been in the guild for days. It's just a gathering with a few good friends. Don't worry." Makarov rubbed his head and laughed. "I'm so sorry, old man." Gray also came to Noah's side, but looked in the direction of the extraordinarily lively commission column and asked curiously, "What's going on? Why does everyone seem to be making a ruckus?" "Let them have their fun." Makarov glanced at the commission board and continued to drink his wine. "Anyway, you'll find out soon enough. I'm afraid it'll take a long time for everyone in the guild to calm down." Noah said helplessly. "So, grandfather, you should explain yourself first." "You're right." Makarov, who knew how noisy his guild members were, knocked his head helplessly. He jumped down from the bar and walked toward the commission board. "All right. Everyone, quiet down." As soon as Makarov's voice fell, the noisy guild immediately fell silent. The guild members in front of the commission board consciously moved aside and made a path for Makarov to pass. When he reached the commission board, Makarov turned around and faced everyone in the guild. He raised the cane in his hand and pointed at an unusually eye-catching commission notice in the middle of the commission board. Noah, who had good eyesight, clearly saw the words on the commission notice and read it out loud. Ritual Lake. Just as he read it out loud, Noah saw Gray show a look of realization and immediately asked, "What is Ritual Lake?" "You don't know?" Gray was startled at first, then nodded. "That's right, you've only been in Fairy's Tale for a year." "What's wrong?" Noah asked curiously. Could it be that everyone is so noisy because of this Ritual Lake? Ritual Lake is a very famous wishing lake. Seeing that Noah really didn't know, Gray explained. According to legend, if you make a wish in this ritual lake, under the witness of the ritual lake, the lake spirit will fulfill the wish of the person who made the wish and make the person's dream come true. Dream come true. Noah suddenly lost most of his interest. Just from the sound of it, you know it's impossible, right? Well, in fact, it's not just you. A lot of people only treat it as a rumor and have never heard of anyone who made a wish there and the lake spirit appeared to fulfill the person's wish. Gray spread his hands. But there was one person who made a wish at the ritual lake and it came true. After saying that, Gray looked at Noah. You know about the Senate, right? Hearing this, Noah raised his eyebrows. The so-called Senate was an organization in the Fiori Kingdom that was responsible for maintaining the order of the magic world. This organization was formed by a chairman and 8 members of the Senate. The main job was to monitor the actions of the Magic Guide Guild, punish the guilds that violated the Senate's rules, and hunt down the dark guilds that threatened the magic world. In the Fiori Kingdom, only guilds that were recognized by the Senate could be considered as official guilds, and the Magic Guide Guild that was recognized by the Senate had to abide by the rules set by the Senate. Otherwise, it would be forcefully disbanded. It was equivalent to the supervisor of all the official guilds in the Fiori Kingdom. I heard that the first chairman of the Senate made a wish at the ritual lake to establish the Senate. Gray said as he pursed his lips. Although it's all thanks to the chairman's outstanding means that he was able to establish the council, ever since the chairman made a wish to establish the council at the ritual lake and successfully established the council, the ritual lake has become the sacred ground of the council. Coincidentally, the ritual lake is a very special lake. Once a large amount of mana is injected into it, the lake will start to glow. Gray looked at Noah, who seemed to be deep in thought. Therefore, unknowingly, there was a rumor in the Senate that if the ritual lake was not allowed to glow, the original wish to establish the Senate would fail and the Senate would be disbanded. Therefore, every year, the Senate would send out a commission to a famous guild to inject mana into the ritual lake. So, that's the commission sent out by the Senate. Noah looked at the commission in the middle of the commission board and asked doubtfully. But why does everyone look like they don't like this commission? Because in order to make the ritual lake glow, an unusually large amount of mana needs to be injected. At least dozens of magic shooters are required to complete the task. But in this way, the commission's reward has to be divided into dozens of portions, so the amount that everyone gets is pitifully small. Gray folded his arms. Even if the Senate sent out a commission with such a pitifully small reward, who would want to accept it? But those bastards in the Senate requested that the guild that receives the commission to complete the task within a month. And this year, it's our fairy tale's turn to receive this commission. Makarov, who was standing in front of the commission board, complained. Although I really want to reject it, those fellows will definitely use this opportunity to trip me up. So, it's better to quickly finish this mission. Hearing Makarov's words, the guild members looked at each other in dismay. Finish the mission, the reward is so low, who would want to do it? That's right, facing the whispers of the guild members, Makarov was not surprised. He tapped the crutch in his hand and said, "You don't have to worry about this, I've already decided." Saying this, Makarov raised his head and looked straight at Noah, who was standing in front of the bar counter. "Noah, you'll be the one to complete this mission." Chapter 5. Noah, you'll be the one to complete this mission. When this sentence reverberated throughout the entire fairy tale guild, there was a sudden silence. Everyone's gazes were focused on Noah. Their eyes and faces were filled with astonishment. Not to mention the magic shooters in the guild, even Noah himself was stunned for a moment, and he exclaimed in shock. "Me? Grandpa, are you kidding me?" Even Gray almost jumped up from his seat. Noah doesn't even know how to use a single spell. How can Noah complete a mission that requires dozens of magic shooters? Since I've said it, then it can't be a joke. Makarov met Noah's astonished gaze and closed his eyes. The main problem with this mission is that the amount of mana needed to inject into the ritual lake is too large. That's why it requires many magic shooters to form a large team every time to complete it. Apart from the mana factor, the mission itself isn't difficult at all, let alone dangerous. Noah. Makarov opened his eyes abruptly and looked at Noah with a serious expression. Although you haven't started learning magic and don't know how to use it, your mana is abnormally large. Even though you're still young, the mana in your body is enough to rival dozens or even hundreds of outstanding magic shooters. You're the most suitable person to complete this mission. Hearing Makarov's explanation, while the members of the guild were shocked that Makarov had overestimated Noah's mana, they also understood why Makarov had made such a decision. Indeed, the most difficult part of this mission was that the target's mana was too large. If this was solved, the mission itself wouldn't be that difficult. Now that Noah could solve the biggest problem of mana alone, this mission didn't require dozens of magic shooters to be dispatched at the same time. Naturally, the reward didn't need to be divided so much. Thus, this mission that was originally the most unpopular suddenly became the most popular. After all, the reward for this mission was 3 million J. 3 million J would be pitifully little if it was divided into dozens of portions. But if it didn't need to be divided, then the reward was so high that people couldn't help but be moved. In addition, the mission itself wasn't difficult or dangerous, and the reward was high. How could this mission not become the most popular? At that moment, the guild members spoke up one after another. Congratulations to you, Noah. You can get such a high reward for the first job in your life. How enviable. Back then, the reward for my first mission was only 70,000 J. It's so small that I want to cry when I think about it. So what? I was only 50,000 J at that time. Wait. Everyone, wait for me. Gray couldn't bear it any longer and yelled out loudly, jumping up and down in a fit of rage. Even so, it's a fact that Noah doesn't know how to use magic. Any wild beast can bite him to death. It doesn't seem dangerous to you, but it's a huge danger to Noah, isn't it? This. The guild members were all speechless. Grandpa. Noah hesitated for a while before shaking his head. Although I want to officially start accepting missions, Gray is right. Even if my magic power isn't weak, I still can't use magic. If I go on a mission, it's not impossible for me to fail. So, let's just forget about it, don't worry. How can I watch my grandson go out to work alone at such a young age? Makarov suddenly smiled. For this mission, Laxus will go with you. The guild members were in an uproar. Laxus. He's going with us. If he goes, there shouldn't be a problem, right? What a pity. I wanted to go with Noah. While the guild members were clamoring, Noah and Gray were silent. Laxus Doria, the grandson of Fairy Tale's guild leader, Makarov, and Noah's elder brother in name, was an outstanding magic shooter who could take charge of an area on his own at the age of 15. Although he was only 15 years old, Laxus's strength as a magic shooter could be ranked among the top in Fairy Tale. He was even stronger than many of the older guild members. He was quite outstanding, and he had already gone on many difficult missions alone. With such an outstanding magic shooter on a mission, Laxus's strength was enough to deal with any accidents that might happen. However, Noah's expression was somewhat complicated. Only Noah knew that Laxus's relationship with Makarov was very strained due to certain matters, and their relationship was not good. It was precisely because of this that Noah stayed in Fairy Tale instead of Makarov's home. In order to persuade Laxus to go with him, Grandpa must have put in a lot of effort, right? Thinking of this, Noah, who was originally hesitant and worried that his ability was not enough for the mission, took a deep breath and nodded heavily. Grandpa, I will definitely complete this mission. As if hearing the emotions contained in Noah's words, the surrounding people all quieted down. Makarov, on the other hand, gave a gratified smile and changed the topic. In addition, besides Laxus, Noah, you have to bring along another person. After saying this, Makarov directly turned his head and looked in the direction of a wooden table in the corner of the guild. Alusha, you come along too. Once this sentence was said, everyone present fell silent, and the surrounding atmosphere began to become oppressive. Alusha, who was sitting at the wooden table in the corner of the guild, did not seem to be aware of this oppressive atmosphere. She stood up, nodded, and directly walked out of the guild. Seeing this scene, the members of the guild were still speechless. Only Gray muttered softly, "That's not right." "What, we're all companions, is there a need to be so cold?" This sentence also expressed the thoughts of everyone in the guild. Makarov kept looking at Alusha until Alusha's back disappeared in the direction of the main door. Only then did he speak softly to Noah beside him. "If it's possible, I hope you can save that child, she's also quite pitiful." Noah turned his head and similarly looked in the direction of the main door. He did not nod, nor did he shake his head, his face was calm. As for what Noah thought in his heart, he himself knew, and Makarov seemed to know as well. A comical smile hung on his face as he continued to drink his wine. After returning to his room, Noah only packed some clothes and some expenses for the journey, carried a small bag, and walked out of the main door amidst Gray's complaints of, "Why can't I, who can use magic, go on a mission?" and the guild members' cheers. There, Alusha, who did not carry anything on her body and only wore a cold armor, quietly waited for Noah's arrival without saying a word. Noah also did not pay attention to Alusha. This was because his gaze had long been snatched away by a figure leaning against the wall of a building not far away. It was a young man of about 15 or 16 years old with short blonde hair and a very modern magical instrument by his ear that could play music. The young man hugged his arms and leaned against the wall with his eyes closed as if he was listening to music. It was only when Noah arrived that he seemed to have noticed and opened his eyes, his sharp gaze landing directly on Noah. Facing the sharp gaze of the other party, Noah did not even pause in his footsteps, and his expression did not change in the slightest as he directly walked over. When he was less than 2 meters away from the other party, he stopped and raised his head, meeting the sharp gaze of the other party. The two of them looked at each other in silence. At the side, Alusha also stood there without saying a word, causing the atmosphere to become heavy. Chapter 6. Relying on the advantage of his height, the gaze of the young man who was looking down at Noah from above became more and more ferocious, causing the atmosphere to become heavier and heavier. It even gave people the feeling that they were ready to draw their swords at any moment. "It's really been a long time. We haven't seen each other for an entire year since I moved into the Fairy Tale Guild, right?" Noah nodded calmly. "Brother Laxus, you're still the same as before. Don't joke around, I'm much stronger than before." Laxus put down the arms in front of her, took a step forward, leaned down, and put her head directly next to Noah's ear, and laughed in a deep voice. "You, on the other hand, are still the same as you were a year ago. Undoubtedly, you have a magical ability that even surprised that old man, but because of one sentence from him, you didn't dare to learn magic. That's all you've got, coward." Oh. Not only was Noah not angry, he even revealed a trace of a smile. "Do you really want me to learn magic?" As soon as Noah's voice fell, Laxus suddenly reached out his hand and wrapped it around Noah's neck. He tightened his grip, pulling Noah close to himself. Seeing this, even Alusha couldn't help but frown. Alusha didn't want to interact with anyone, even if they were in the same guild. However, that didn't mean that Alusha could remain indifferent to the internal strife of people in the same guild. Of course, she couldn't remain indifferent, but Alusha had no intention of interfering at all. She still stood quietly by herself. Although Laxus's entire body was emitting a dangerous aura, giving off the feeling that he could attack at any time, Alusha didn't feel any real hostility from him. Most importantly, Noah, who was tightly restrained by Laxus's neck, still had a calm expression, as if he wasn't worried that Laxus would attack him. Compared to the frowning Alusha, he was really indifferent. What I hate the most is your expression of being able to do anything no matter what. Laxus put away his smile and continued speaking with an expressionless face. I just want to tell you, even if you were picked up by that old man from who knows where, since you're my younger brother, I won't allow you to be a weakling, understand? Picked up from who knows where. Alusha finally fixed her gaze on Noah for the first time after Laxus spoke, her eyes revealing a complicated expression. Originally, he was just like me, an orphan. Noah, who didn't know that Alusha's state of mind had changed, let out a sneer at Laxus's words for the first time. You speak as if you're strong, but compared to grandfather, you're still far from being strong. Laxus's face darkened, but it was quickly replaced by an unruly smile. That's only temporary. Sooner or later, I'll trample that old man under my feet. Anne. Laxus laughed maniacally. Even now, I can still crush you with one hand, my younger brother. After saying this, Laxus seemed to have lost interest in continuing the conversation. He let go of Noah, glanced at Alusha, and snorted coldly. That old man actually wants me to be the nanny of two brats who don't even know how to walk. Undoubtedly, these kinds of weaklings should just be thrown to the side. Fairy's tale is not a nursery. Laxus used such cruel words on the wrong person. There were two young boys and girls of the same age. One had a calm expression as usual, while the other didn't even lift her eyelids. They were unusually cold, and this made Laxus feel bored, so he turned around and left. Hurry up and finish this boring quest for me. Noah and Alusha still didn't pay attention to Laxus. They followed behind Laxus and walked towards the exit of Villa Magnolia. On the way from Villa Magnolia to the ritual lake, even if they took the train, they would still need to pass through at least 4 towns. It would take them an entire day to reach their destination. Ever since he met Makarov, was adopted by Makarov, and joined Fairy's Tale, Noah usually walked around Villa Magnolia. This was his first time going out so far. Even though Noah had already studied the route to the ritual lake, and even studied the map, it was still unknown if the station staff would allow an 11-year-old child to take the train. Therefore, Noah and Alusha only followed Laxus. They got on the train under Lax's lead, and then they took the train for an entire day before arriving at the ritual lake. It was worth mentioning that along the way, Noah, Alusha, and Laxus didn't even talk to each other. However, Laxus paid for the train tickets and 3 meals. Of course, Laxus didn't care about this small amount of money, and he wouldn't care about it just because he had 2 annoying teammates. The 3 of them only got off the train when the sky turned dark. Sorry, as soon as they got off the train, a middle-aged man wearing a formal suit walked out from the crowd. He glanced at the Fairy's Tale guild emblem on the back of Noah's right hand and Alusha's armor. He then asked in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. I'm the person sent by the council to be in charge of the mission to inject mana into the ritual lake. The 3 of you must be the magic shooters from Fairy's Tale, right? Council. Laxus sized up the middle-aged man for a second before looking away. Then, lead the way. Hearing this, the middle-aged man furrowed his brows. Don't we need to wait for the others from the other guilds? Others? Laxus understood the middle-aged man's meaning and grinned. There's no one else, just the 3 of us. 3 people. The middle-aged man showed a stunned expression. Although the middle-aged man wasn't a magic shooter, since the council sent him to be in charge of the mission to inject mana into the ritual lake, it was impossible that he didn't know anything about the ritual lake. Of course, the middle-aged man also knew that every year, the guilds that came to carry out the mission had to send at least 10 magic shooters to form a large team to inject mana into the ritual lake. Only then could the ritual lake be activated and glow. But now, the other party said that only the 3 of them came. The middle-aged man's first reaction was disbelief, but then he remembered the rumors about Fairy's Tale. Although Fairy's Tale was the strongest magic guide guild in the Fiori Kingdom, the council didn't like them. The reason was simple. The guild master of Fairy's Tale, Makarov, advocated for the members of the guild to follow the path in their hearts and walk the path of magic that belonged to them. For this reason, he publicly announced to the guild members that even if it was the council's words, they didn't need to pay attention to it. Such actions, in the eyes of Fairy's Tale, were free and casual, but in the eyes of the council, it was indulgence. Naturally, they didn't like such a guild. Could it be that the other party didn't care about the council's mission this time? The middle-aged man's brows furrowed even tighter. The three of you, I think it would be better to ask your guild master to send more people, huh? Laxus laughed, and his laughter was unusually arrogant. Could it be that there's a requirement for more people to come this time? There's no such thing. Since there's no such thing, then don't talk so much nonsense. It's fine as long as we can complete the mission. Laxus said impatiently. Since you're here to lead the way, then lead the way obediently. The middle-aged man was speechless and could only lead the way out of the station. Chapter 7. The night was getting darker, since the night had already fallen when they arrived at their destination. Noah and the others decided to rest for the night after discussing with the middle-aged man from the council. They would carry out the mission tomorrow by injecting mana into the ritual lake and activating it. Laxus didn't say anything about this. He left Noah and Alusha behind and returned to the hotel arranged by the middle-aged man from the council to rest. Alusha also left without saying a word. No one knew where she went. There was only one such team that was incompatible in all aspects. However, Noah had more or less expected this situation and didn't mind it. After placing his luggage in the hotel room, he brought along a large number of magic control pearls and walked out of the hotel. This was a city that was unfamiliar to Noah. If it were another 11-year-old child, he or she wouldn't dare to wander around. Noah was the same. To avoid any accidents, even if he wanted to train his mana control, he didn't stray too far from the hotel. He chose a small river that he could clearly see from the entrance of the hotel and walked towards it. However, to Noah's surprise, the riverbank of the small river had already been reached by another person. Ha ha! He saw a young girl wearing a simple dress and an ice-cold armor. She wore a medical eye patch over one of her eyes. She had red hair that could be clearly seen in the night. She was standing by the riverbank alone. She was holding a knight's sword that had a short blade that matched her figure. She was waving it with a stern expression on her face. Alusha. Looking at the red-haired girl who was wielding her knight's sword, Noah was startled at first. Then, he remained silent and walked towards the bank of the river, a distance away from Alusha. Alusha, who was wielding her knight's sword, naturally saw Noah's arrival. She stared blankly at him as he walked towards the bank of the river, grabbed a handful of beads, and scattered them into the sky. Before Alusha could react, an extremely powerful mana suddenly emerged from Noah's body. Like a rolling airflow, it carried specks of fluorescent light and swayed towards the beads that were scattered into the sky. In the next moment, many beads were covered by the mana and floated around Noah. However, some of them fell to the ground and some were bounced away. Alusha didn't know what Noah was doing. However, she clearly felt the mana that emerged from Noah's body that was countless times stronger than hers. Instantly, her heart was filled with shock and astonishment. At this moment, Alusha recalled the comments that Makarov and Laxus made about Noah in the morning. He doesn't know magic, but possesses a mana so powerful that even the chairman is shocked. Alusha frowned slightly. She couldn't help but recall the scene of Noah leaving behind a cheesecake for her and leaving without saying anything. Alusha subconsciously put away the knight's sword that she had wielded countless times and walked towards Noah involuntarily. Noah, who was still persevering in training his mana control, heard such an awe-inspiring voice from behind him at a certain moment. With such powerful mana, why don't you learn magic? The mana that emerged from Noah's body paused for a moment before slowly retreating back into Noah's body. The orbs floating around Noah all fell to the ground with a series of clattering sounds. Noah turned his head and looked at Alusha, who was standing behind him. She held a knight's sword in her hand and stared at him with only one exposed eye. However, there wasn't a trace of emotion in her eyes. He shook his head and responded to Alusha's question. It's because of my powerful mana that Grandpa doesn't allow me to learn magic. The chairman doesn't allow it. Alusha was surprised. Why? I haven't been able to completely control my mana. Noah said in a low voice. Grandpa said that if I use such unstable mana to use magic, once the mana goes berserk, the magic will go berserk as well. When that happens, I will bring disaster to the people around me. After hearing Noah's explanation, Alusha also understood Makarov's intentions. Indeed, with such powerful mana, once Noah learned how to use magic, his strength would definitely not be comparable to an ordinary magic shooter. In that case, once Noah's magic went berserk, it would indeed bring about unimaginable disaster. Alusha, who had such thoughts, did not know that even if he had not learned how to use magic, Noah's mana was strong enough to bring about disaster with just pure mana alone. However, with Makarov's strength, it was more than enough to deal with Noah, who had not learned magic and went berserk. But once Noah learned magic and went berserk, even Makarov did not have the confidence to suppress him. Therefore, Makarov solemnly requested Noah to train until Noah could control his mana well before learning magic. This caused Noah to walk the path of training his mana control for a year. And this year's training only allowed Noah to barely reach a passing level in terms of controlling his mana. One could imagine how powerful the mana in Noah's body was. But Alusha frowned slightly. Your brother seems to disagree with your decision to not learn magic, right? His situation is a bit special. Noah laughed bitterly. Because of some things, he is almost blindly pursuing power now. So, in his opinion, my action of giving up power that can be easily obtained must be quite an eyesore, right? Then what about you? Alusha looked closely at Noah. Don't you want to obtain great power? Me? Noah met Alusha's gaze and suddenly smiled. If this power is used to hurt people, I'd rather not have it. Alusha's heart trembled slightly, and her originally emotionless eyes began to fluctuate. Grandpa said that the power of magic is the power of the heart and also the power of the soul. A person's magic can see the essence of the person's heart and soul. Noah said word by word. So, he hopes that I can use this power to protect the people around me, and he also hopes that I can work hard in this direction. With that, Noah reached out his hand and caressed Alusha's cold cheek under her gaze. He also caressed the delicate little face in front of him, the eye of Alusha that was covered by the medical eye mask. It's the same for you. Even if one of your eyes is covered, don't let your heart be covered. Even if you only have one eye left, please use it to see clearly, the people around you. The gentle words and the warm palm on her cheek made Alusha's completely frozen heart tremble heavily. When she came back to her senses, the person in front of her had already disappeared, and the warmth on her cheek had also disappeared. However, on the ground in front of Alusha, a strawberry cake was placed there. The sweet aroma drilled into the tip of Alusha's nose, causing Alusha to be stunned for a long time without any reaction. The night was still getting darker. The next day, Noah woke up early and changed his clothes. After putting on a jacket, he opened the door of the room, walked out of the hotel room, and walked to the first floor. The first floor of the hotel was similar to an ordinary bar. It was filled with wooden tables. Almost every table had wine on it. Many people had woken up early in the morning. Some of them had even stayed up all night. It was bustling with noise and excitement as they drank. It was very lively. At one of the wooden tables, Laxus sat there, but his feet were directly placed on the table in front of him. He was wearing a magical instrument that played music by his ear. When he saw Noah coming down from upstairs, he pursed his lips and stood up. As he walked, he said the exact same words as when he set off yesterday. "Hurry up and end this boring mission for me." Coincidentally, Elusha also came down from upstairs. Her gaze was fixed on Noah, and she actually nodded at Noah as a greeting, which was rare for her. Noah smiled and walked out of the hotel. Chapter 8. Noah, Elusha, and Laxus only knew that the ritual lake was in this city, but they did not know its exact location. If they wanted to go to the ritual lake, they would have to be led by the middle-aged man from the council. Thus, after a night's rest, Noah, Elusha, and Laxus stood at the entrance, motionless as they waited for the middle-aged man's arrival. They had agreed yesterday that they would meet at the entrance of the hotel at this time today, and then they would go to the ritual lake together. Now, there was not much time left before the meeting, and the middle-aged man should be arriving soon. However, when the middle-aged man appeared in front of Noah, Elusha, and Laxus, the three of them were stunned. The reason was simple. The middle-aged man did not come alone. Behind the middle-aged man, there was a group of at least 30 people of different genders, different ages, different heights, and different clothes. However, they all looked unfriendly as they followed behind the middle-aged man, and appeared in front of the three of them. On these people's bodies, there were guild emblems of different colors and shapes exposed in the air. Obviously, these people were all from the same guild. Looking at the emblems on these people's bodies, Laxus, who originally had an unruly expression on his face, narrowed his eyes. The ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord. The ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord. Noah and Elusha were startled at first, and then they both showed an expression of surprise. The ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord. This name, even though Noah and Elusha had not joined the guild for long, they had heard of it before. Among the many official guilds in the Fiori Kingdom, the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord, could be said to be the most outstanding guild. At its peak, it was even called the #1 guild in the Fiori Kingdom, and it was a guild that gathered many powerful sorcerers. Even now, the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord, was still one of the most outstanding guilds in the Fiori Kingdom, and its strength was still vaguely known as the #1 guild in the Fiori Kingdom. However, in recent years, Fairy Tail, had started to stand out, and was gradually catching up to the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord. This made the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord's title as the #1 guild in the Fiori Kingdom more or less undeserved. It was also because of this that in recent years, the relationship between Fairy Tail, and the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord, had started to become tense, and it gave people the feeling that they could compete with each other at any time. Because of this, when he saw the sorcerers of the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord, appear here, and they were even following behind the middle-aged man from the council, Laxus's expression darkened, and he coldly looked at the middle-aged man with an indifferent expression. "What's going on here?" Hearing Laxus's completely undisguised question, the middle-aged man's expression did not change as he answered. "My apologies, everyone. After reporting the situation to the council yesterday, the higher-ups of the council invited the sorcerers from the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord, branch to come and help." The middle-aged man glanced at Laxus. "After all, your guild only sent 3 people, and they seem to be lacking in experience. It's normal for the higher-ups to be a little uneasy." Hearing this, how could Noah and the other 2 not understand the middle-aged man's meaning? The middle-aged man did not believe that Fairy Tail, could complete a large-scale mission that required dozens of sorcerers with just 3 people, and all of them were underage brats. Hence, he invited the ruler of the underworld, Phantom Lord, to help. Thus, Laxus laughed, and his laughter was unusually violent. "In other words, let's not talk about these 2 brats for now. Are you looking down on me? As he spoke, a somewhat berserk mana slowly rose from Laxus's body. Beep, beep, beep. In the next moment, golden electric arcs flashed from Laxus's body, as if there were little golden snakes scuttling around Laxus's body. With an extremely dense sound of electric shocks, it engulfed the surroundings. Seeing this scene, not only did the middle-aged man and the group of people behind him change their expressions, even Alusha's eyes revealed a hint of astonishment. Although the mana rising from Laxus's body was not as strong as Noah's, it was enough to surpass that of an ordinary sorcerer by several times. At the age of 15, he was already several times stronger than an ordinary sorcerer. Whether it was talent or strength, Laxus had the qualifications to be arrogant. Only Noah at the side frowned slightly as he looked at Laxus's body that was flashing with golden electric arcs and powerful mana. Even Makarov did not know that apart from being born with an incomparably powerful mana, Noah also had a sensory ability that others could not hope to reach. Thus, Noah could clearly sense that in the mana rising from Laxus, who specialized in thunder magic, there was an extremely oppressive force in addition to the berserk nature of thunder magic. It was as if there was a ferocious beast hiding in Laxus's mana. Such a special mana made Noah unable to shift his gaze away for a moment as he stared unwaveringly at Laxus. Compared to Noah, the middle-aged man, who was facing Laxus's wrath, had already turned pale in an instant. Although he was a member of the council, his position was not high, and he only knew a little bit of magic. It was difficult for him to even be called a magic shooter. Facing Laxus's abnormally berserk mana was no different from facing a charging chariot. The fear he felt was indescribable to outsiders. Enough. At this time, a person who was obviously the leader of the magic shooters from the Phantom Lord branch took a step forward and looked coldly at Laxus, whose body was surging with electric arcs. Little brat from Fairy Tale, it's not a wise thing to do to a member of the Senate. A mere member of the Phantom Lord branch wants to stand out. Laxus laughed wildly, the electric arcs on his body becoming even more resplendent. Good, I'll get rid of you as well. I, Moglia, am not at the stage where I would bicker with a little brat. The self-proclaimed Moglia's magic shooter from the Phantom Lord branch said this, but his gaze towards Laxus became colder and colder. Besides, do you want to openly clash with someone from another guild in front of the council? The council had clearly stated that guilds were not allowed to fight with each other. If there was a violation, the guild would be forcibly disbanded. If not for this rule, Moglia might not have wanted to bicker with Laxus. Then, is there a rule in the council that states that two guilds can blatantly snatch jobs from each other? Laxus sneered. Since you want to snatch jobs, then there is a need to determine the winner. Even the council has nothing to say, right? We will not snatch your jobs. Moglia said in a strange tone. We are only here as a precaution. We will only make a move if you fail your mission. Before you fail your mission, we will not make a move. The electric arcs on Laxus's body suddenly froze. Chapter 9. Phantom Lord, will only make a move after the fairy tale quest has failed. Looking at the disdainful looks on the faces of the magic shooters of Phantom Lord, Noah, Alusha, and Laxus immediately understood what was going on. It was obvious that Phantom Lord did not believe that Fairy Tale could complete a mission that required dozens of magic shooters with just the three of them. Therefore, although this sentence seemed to give Fairy Tale a way out of this embarrassing situation, it was clear from the reaction of the magic shooters that they only wanted to see Fairy Tale embarrass herself. How is it? You little brats from Fairy Tale. Moglia's lips slowly curled upwards. We're only here to clean up the aftermath, we won't be hindering your work, right? Hearing this, Laxus had no reason to act no matter how displeased he was. Even Alusha, who had been watching from the sidelines, could not help but let down her guard. Brother Laxus. Noah suddenly called out from the side. I heard that although the reward for completing this mission is a whole 3 million J, if it's divided into dozens of portions, the reward is a little low. Alusha and Laxas were startled awake. That's right. Although the quest to activate the ritual lake had a reward of 3 million J, it was definitely not a low reward. However, if the reward was split into dozens of portions, it would be a lot less. This was also the reason why this quest was so unpopular among many guilds. Since someone had accepted such an unpopular quest, the other guilds couldn't wait to see such a thing happen. However, Phantom Lord had organized a large group of players to come here even though someone had accepted the quest, saying that they wouldn't interfere with Noah and the other two's work. Perhaps it was the exact opposite, the other party had come specifically to hinder Fairy Tale from completing this mission. Realizing this, Alusha and Laxus's faces were about to darken when Noah suddenly laughed again. However, Fairy Tale is only sending out 3 people this time, so this reward is quite a lot for us. We have to do our best to complete this mission. 3 people? Complete it properly. The magic shooters from the Phantom Lord branch sneered in unison. Even Moglia could not help but look at Noah with a faint smile. Then please allow us to assist you from the side, so that we can learn from you. Ha 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 ha. The magic shooters from the Phantom Lord branch all laughed out loud. Their laughter was filled with contempt, disdain, and ridicule. Hearing the other party's laughter, not to mention the increasingly irritable Laxus, even the cold-hearted Alusha could not help but feel a trace of anger. Only Noah maintained his composure from beginning to end, ignoring the ridicule of the Phantom Lord, as he spoke to the middle-aged man who could not get a word in edgewise. Should you lead the way? Oh. The middle-aged man seemed to have not completely recovered from Laxus's deterrence. His face was still pale, and he nodded blankly. His footsteps were somewhat shaky as he walked in a direction in front. Noah shrugged and immediately followed. Alusha was silent for a while. She wordlessly raised her foot and followed. Laxus stared at Noah's back for a while, then glanced at the magic shooters from the Phantom Lord, and walked forward with a cold expression. The sorcerers from the Phantom Lord branch looked at each other and continued to mock each other as they followed along with a frivolous attitude. No one noticed that Moglia, like Laxus, had been staring at the small back of Noah who was walking in front. His originally relaxed expression began to disappear. For some reason, Moglia had a very ominous premonition in his heart. Under the guidance of the middle-aged man, the group walked towards the center of the city while the people in the city pointed and gossiped. Logically speaking, in a city, the closer it was to the center, the more crowded it would be. However, this city was the exact opposite. The closer it was to the center, the fewer people there would be. This was because in the center of the city was the ritual lake, which was regarded as a sacred place by the council. To the council, this lake represented the faith in their hearts. Naturally, to others, this lake was a forbidden area. After all, the council could not just casually let people enter their sacred place, right? Perhaps it was because they had been notified in advance, or perhaps it was because the middle-aged man was leading the way, but along the way, many soldiers with weapons in their hands patrolled the surroundings. Even if they saw the guild emblems of Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord walking in the direction of the ritual lake, they did not step forward to stop them. Under such circumstances, after walking for about 15 minutes, the group of people who were walking in the direction of the ritual lake began to have a wider field of vision. In front of them were no longer the same streets and buildings. Instead, it was as if they had entered a natural park. All around them, flowers and plants began to appear. Not long after, an extremely clear lake with a diameter of more than 100 meters appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Those with sharp eyes could see that on the surface of this extremely clear lake was a stone bridge. The bottom of the bridge sank directly into the water, and the bridge was almost level with the surface of the water. One end of the bridge was connected to the shore, while the other extended to the center of the lake. There was a pavilion there. In the middle of the pavilion, there was a platform with a stone ball the size of a crystal bowl. The middle-aged man directly led the members of Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord onto the stone bridge and walked into the pavilion in the center of the lake. They came to the platform where the stone ball was placed and faced everyone. His gaze first timidly circled around Laxus. Then, the middle-aged man lowered his head and spoke softly. "This is the ceremonial platform of the ritual lake. As long as enough mana is injected into the wishing stone of the ceremonial platform, the ritual lake will be activated." Hearing this, the members of Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord turned their gazes to the platform where the stone ball was placed. "In other words," Noah asked, "as long as we inject mana into the stone ball, if the mana is enough to activate the ritual lake will glow and our mission will be complete, right?" "Yes." "Yes, then, members of Fairy Tale, it's your turn to make a move." Even though he was inexplicably anxious, Mowgli chose to temporarily put it aside and spoke somewhat mockingly to Noah, Elisha, and Laxus. "Let's see how Fairy's Tale managed to complete a large-scale quest that requires dozens of sorcerers to work together with just 3 brats." "Yes, yes. Hurry up." Phantom Lord, the rest of the sorcerers also began to instigate the Lord of the Underworld. Noah raised his head, a trace of shrewdness flashing across his deep pair of eyes. Chapter 10. Under the mocking and disdainful gazes of the magic shooters from the Phantom Lord, Noah took a step forward and walked past everyone to stand in front of the ritual platform. His face did not have the slightest fluctuation, only a palpitating calmness. Perhaps it was because of this calmness, all the sounds in the surroundings disappeared at this moment, including the mocking laughter of the magic shooters from the Phantom Lord. Looking at the small figure standing in front of them and feeling the oppressive calmness in the surroundings, Mowgli's inexplicable irritation grew stronger and stronger, to the point that he could not help but ask Laxus sarcastically, "Letting him go alone? Could it be that the Fairy Tale has decided to give up on this mission?" Originally, the fact that the Fairy Tale only sent out 3 people, and all of them were underage brats, to complete this kind of large-scale mission had already made Mowgli a sneer in his heart. He did not know how many times he had cursed them for being stupid, let alone now that there was only Noah. Laxus glanced sideways at Mowgli. The originally gloomy expression on his face had completely disappeared, and he did not even bother to reply. He stared at Noah's back and slowly clenched his fists. "Let me see how strong the magic that even the old man is afraid of is." Like Laxus, Elisha was also staring at Noah's back. However, unlike Laxus, Elisha had already seen the strength of Noah's magic. In addition, this mission was basically Noah's main task, and Elisha and Laxus were not so much partners on this mission, but more like bodyguards. Therefore, Elisha did not doubt Noah's ability to complete this mission. Elisha could only wonder if Noah's magic, which she had seen at the riverbank yesterday, was Noah's limit. Everyone present had their own thoughts, but strangely, no one made a sound. Noah, who stood in front of the ritual platform, took in a deep breath, suppressing the undetectable nervousness in his first official mission deep into his heart. Then, he reached out his hand. A pair of palms that were much smaller than that of an adult slowly extended to the top of the crystal ball-sized stone ball on the ritual platform as though they were pressing down on it. At the next moment, Noah closed his eyes and his mind instantly sank into his body, mobilizing the magical power that was as vast as the ocean. Along with the sound of the vibration in the surrounding air, the ocean-like powerful magic fiercely burst out from Noah's small body, like a torrent of light that suddenly rushed into the sky, suddenly rising up into the sky. Wah! Feeling the powerful magic that caused even the space to tremble suddenly rising from Noah's body, the magic shooters of the Phantom Lord were all shocked. Mowgli's pupils also shrank. Even Elisha, who already knew, and Laxus, who was mentally prepared, had a dignified expression, their eyes full of shock. Strong. Really too strong. In terms of magic alone, Noah was absolutely qualified to look down on everyone in the entire continent. At least, Laxus, who had felt the powerful magic from Makarov more than once, was certain that Noah's magic was enough to surpass Makarov's. And it must be known that Makarov's strength was enough to be ranked in the top 10 super powerhouses in the entire continent. Although it was only magic, but Noah was able to surpass Makarov in this aspect, and at only the age of 11 at that, it was easy to imagine the shock it brought to Laxus. As for the magic shooters of the Phantom Lord and the middle-aged man from the Senate, they had long been stunned, unable to react for a while. Noah acted as if there was no one around him, slowly controlling the huge amount of magic that burst out from his body, causing countless people, including Makarov, to be shocked to the core. It was as if he firmly controlled it in his hand. Following his control, it flowed into the crystal ball-sized stone ball. The heavy stone ball suddenly blossomed with a strong light, bringing along rich colors, illuminating every corner of the scene. Alusha, Laxus, Moglia, and the others were suddenly blinded by the sudden strong light. They were shocked and hurriedly raised their hands to block in front of their eyes. Many of the magic shooters of the Phantom Lord exclaimed, causing the scene to be chaotic. After an unknown amount of time, the strong light gradually dissipated, allowing the crowd's vision to return to the vast expanse of whiteness. When everyone opened their eyes with lingering fear, the scene in front of them had changed. First of all, the strong light that gradually dissipated didn't immediately disappear. Instead, it stopped after fading to a certain extent. Just like the gentle light of a magic lamp, it shone on everyone's body. It was the light that bloomed from the originally crystal-clear ritual lake. The stone ball placed on the ceremonial platform in the middle of the pavilion had turned into a real crystal ball. Its entire body was releasing strands of colorful light, like a flashlight. It was extremely dazzling. Looking at this scene, no one made a sound at the scene, as if they were in a daze, unable to return to their senses for a long time. Of course, it was not because the scene in front of them was beautiful, but because the development of the situation had made everyone's minds blank for a period of time, and there was no way for them to operate smoothly. Phew. Noah opened his eyes and exhaled a breath after noticing the changes in front of him. In his heart, the tension that had been suppressed in the depths of his heart due to his first work had turned into joy, and he slightly clenched his fist. Fortunately, there were no mistakes at the crucial moment. Only Noah knew how dangerous the work just now was. Noah had not been able to completely control the mana in his body. If he used a large amount of mana like just now, if he was not careful and exceeded the range of Noah's control, then, at least, it would cause the mana to go berserk again. At that time, not to mention the safety of the people present, the ritual lake that was regarded as a sacred place by the council would probably disappear in history. That would be a big problem. Fortunately, when Noah's mana was almost at the limit of his control, the ritual lake was finally successfully activated, and it was a daunting experience without any danger. What they did not know was that after using such a large amount of mana, not only did Noah not look tired at all, but his face was full of joy, and in the eyes of others, it was a stimulation to the brain that slightly short-circuited for a moment. Hey! After the joy, Noah looked at the middle-aged man who was still in a daze and smiled slightly. So, our mission is considered complete, right? Ah. Ah. The middle-aged man reacted, and a large amount of sweat flowed down his face as he forced a laugh out loud. Yes. Yes. Completed, then, our reward, yes. Yes. The middle-aged man stuttered submissively. I will hand it over as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Noah nodded in satisfaction and glanced at the magic shooters of the ruler of the netherworld, Phantom Lord, who were still in a state of shock, and smiled. I originally thought that 3 people would be needed, but in the end, 1 person actually completed it. My president sometimes makes mistakes in his calculations. After saying this, Noah walked out of the pavilion without looking back. Ha 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 ha. Laxus laughed out loud, and Alusha, who was also smiling slightly, followed suit. The magic shooters of the ruler of the netherworld, Phantom Lord, were at a loss. Only Moglia stared at the gradually disappearing Noah, a trace of malevolence appearing on his face. Chapter 11. Juan. You're welcome to come again. With a fake smile on his face and words that couldn't get any more fake, the middle-aged man from the council bowed to Noah, Alusha, and Laxus at the entrance of the hotel. He looked like he wanted to never see Fairy Tale again. Noah, Alusha, and Laxus naturally didn't care about the middle-aged man's pretentiousness. They also knew that the middle-aged man was scared to death by Noah and Laxus. After receiving the 3 million J, they packed their luggage and headed to the train station. However, along the way, Alusha's expression showed that she couldn't get over it. Is it really okay to take a third of the reward? Her face, which was originally very awe-inspiring, was full of entanglement. Alusha said to Noah, who was beside her. I only came with you. I didn't contribute to the mission this time. I didn't even help at all. Taking a third of the reward is unacceptable. We're all in the same guild. Don't treat me like an outsider. Noah sighed. Since we're working together, it's normal to split the reward equally. It's not like there's a rule stating that those who contribute more will get more rewards. Instead of being unable to get over it, isn't it better to accept it gratefully? Looking at Alusha's expression that was still unable to get over it, it was a stark contrast to Alusha. From the beginning, Laxus had accepted a third of the reward as a matter of course. Noah shrugged and changed the topic. As for the matter of Phantom Lord, I have to tell Grandpa when I get back. Hearing this, Alusha became silent. Laxus's eyes also flashed with a cold light. Because Fairy Tale was getting stronger and stronger, as a member of Fairy Tale, Noah, Alusha, and Laxus knew that the relationship between Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord was getting more and more tense. However, they didn't expect it to be this tense. This time, Phantom Lord directly interfered with the work of Fairy Tale. Moreover, it was a task assigned by the council, so it was easy to guess what he was up to. If it wasn't for the fact that Noah could provide the mana of dozens of magic shooters, Phantom Lord wouldn't have obediently stood aside and watched Fairy Tale complete this task. Although it was only a branch of Phantom Lord that did this, it didn't mean that Phantom Lord was going to officially go against Fairy Tale. However, who knew if this would be the case in the future? Therefore, Phantom Lord's action this time was more like a prelude. Thinking about it, if this continued, the relationship between Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord would get worse and worse. When the fuse appeared, it was possible that they would become enemies. In order to prevent the same thing from happening in the future, there was a need to report this matter to Makarov. Phantom Lord. Laxus's face was gloomy. Really, just anyone can step on Fairy Tale. When did the guild become so weak? Alusha stopped in her tracks. Weak? Noah looked straight at Laxus. It should be the opposite, right? It's because the guild has become stronger that Phantom Lord is looking for trouble, right? Ha! Laxus looked at Noah with a sinister expression and met Noah's gaze. A mere branch dared to provoke us. If this isn't weak, then what is? Is that so? Undoubtedly, Noah, who had been mocked and insulted by Laxus without batting an eyelid yesterday, was now fearlessly confronting Laxus. His gaze became sharper than Laxus's, causing Alusha to feel a burst of surprise. Do you think that a guild with your grandfather in it would be weak? The guild leader of Phantom Lord is one of the 10 great saint magicians. Isn't that old man also one of the 10 great saint magicians? Laxus had already stopped in his tracks, looking down at Noah coldly. They're both 10 great saint magicians. If another guild's branch dares to openly find trouble with our guild, won't they be looked down upon? Noah's eyes immediately narrowed. 10 great saint magicians. 10 great saint magicians who were unanimously recognized as the most outstanding and righteous in the entire continent by the highest authority in the magic world, the Council of Judges. Every one of these 10 great saint magicians possessed unimaginable power. It was said that the battle between the 10 great saint magicians would be like the heavens falling and the earth rending. Just the clash of magic would cause the earth to tremble and the mountains to shake. They were truly monster-level powerhouses. The 10 great saint magicians were also ranked. However, the 10 great saint magicians were not ranked based on their individual battle prowess. There were even people who did not know how to fight at all, but they had reached the pinnacle of a certain field of magic. No one could ignore such an existence. Makarov was one of the 10 great saint magicians. The guild leader of the Phantom Lord was also one of the 10 great saint magicians. It was precisely because both guilds had the 10 great saint magicians who were known as the strongest great saint magicians that people thought that Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord were vying for the #1 guild in the Fiori Kingdom. Fairy Tale is really getting weaker and weaker. It's about to become the cradle of weaklings. Laxus said with some resentment, turning his irritable gaze towards Noah. And you have such powerful magic, but you don't even dare to learn magic. Are you willing to be a weakling? Looking at Lax's irritable eyes that contained traces of disappointment, Noah lowered his head. After a moment of silence, he once again turned his gaze towards Laxus. Magic, I will learn it. Laxus fiercely reached out his hand and grabbed Noah's collar, his face filled with rage as he shouted. Then hurry up. Laxus. Alusha finally couldn't ignore it anymore. She also reached out her hand and grabbed Laxus's arm that was grabbing Noah's collar. Calm down. Let go of Noah. However, Laxus didn't even look at Alusha. After seeing that Noah's extremely sharp gaze had slowly calmed down after he directly made a move on him, anger inexplicably rose in his heart. How long are you going to be a coward? Do you really want me to look down on you? What are you so anxious about? Noah ignored the fact that his body was almost lifted off the ground and said indifferently. It shouldn't have any effect if I learn magic later, right? But you're making people feel that you're an eyesore. Laxus growled. You bear the Dole's surname, but you don't even have a bit of combat power. Do you know how many people are laughing at you? Dole's surname. Noah stared into Laxus's eyes. Does this surname give you a lot of pressure? Laxus held his breath. Clap, 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 clap. At this moment, a burst of applause entered the ears of Noah, Alusha, and Laxus. Chapter 12. Clap, 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 clap. The clear sound of clapping reverberated in the surroundings, causing Noah, Alusha, and Laxus to frown slightly. They turned their heads and looked in the direction of the sound. They saw that a group of people had formed a circle around Noah, Alusha, and Laxus. Everyone had a sinister smile on their faces, and their expressions were rather unfriendly. They were none other than the sorcerers of the Phantom Lord. Although you all seem to be very busy, we still have to disturb you. I'm really sorry. Moglia, who was the leader, clapped his hands while smiling. However, his eyes were emitting a cold light. So, can't we leave our quarrel for later? Of course. Moglia narrowed his eyes, and the smile on his face grew wider. That's only if you have a future. Hearing this and seeing the unfriendly expressions of the magic shooters of the Phantom Lord, Noah, Alusha, and Laxus could guess that they were not friendly even if they were stupid. Humph. Raxus calmly loosened his grip on Noah's collar, suppressing the hesitation caused by Noah's words into the depths of his heart. He then spoke to Moglia in a mocking tone. Looks like some people can't afford to lose. No wonder they can only survive in a small branch. The smile on Moglia's face stiffened, and his expression gradually became restrained. However, his eyes became colder and colder. You can still maintain your composure in this situation. You really are Makarov's grandson. What Makarov's grandson? Laxus's face showed a trace of ruthlessness. The only one here is me, Laxus, not Makarov's grandson. That kind of thing doesn't matter. Moglia waved his hand impatiently. It doesn't matter if you're Makarov's grandson or not. As long as you're a member of Fairy Tale, it's fine. Noah, who was tidying his collar, slightly paused and raised his head. In other words, Phantom Lord really wants to go against Fairy Tale. I don't know if Phantom Lord is trying to make things difficult for Fairy Tale. Morgoria sneered. I only know that I don't like you guys very much. Do you want to start a war between the two guilds? Alusha's face was full of vigilance. Didn't you say that this wasn't a wise choice? Then let me tell you what the truly wise choice is. Moglia took a step forward and said. For you guys, kneeling down and apologizing is the wisest choice. Hearing this, not only did Laxus laugh, but even Noah and Alusha's expressions began to turn cold. Kneel down and apologize. Laxus looked around at all the magic shooters of Phantom Lord, then fixed his gaze on Moglia. Sorry, but unlike you guys, I won't give you the chance to kneel down and apologize. As soon as he finished speaking, Laxus's figure instantly disappeared from where he was standing. Amidst the sound of something breaking through the air, an afterimage wrapped in golden lightning suddenly flashed in front of Moglia. At almost the same time, a fist carrying a golden arc of lightning was imprinted in Moglia's vision. Ha! Looking at the fist carrying a violent arc of lightning that was blasting towards his face, Moglia's pupils fiercely shrank. He roared, and his body suddenly surged with a golden current. Bang! Following the sound of a huge collision, a circle of wind swept out from the center of the collision. The golden electric current also spread out in all directions, causing the surrounding Phantom Lord's magic shooters to cry out in alarm as they retreated in panic. Noah and Alusha were closer to the center of the collision, but their reaction was faster than the magic shooters of Phantom Lord. The moment the collision sounded, they immediately retreated to a place where the current could not reach before stopping. At the center of the collision, Laxus, whose body was flashing with golden arcs of lightning, looked at Moglia, whose body was also flowing with a golden current, and his face slightly darkened. You already knew that I was in this mission, right? Lightning magic wasn't very rare. On the contrary, elemental magic with specific attributes was very common, and magic shooters who could use lightning magic were also very common. However, to be able to use lightning magic to the extent that it was comparable to Laxus, and to be the leader of Phantom Lord's branch that came to obstruct Fairy Tale's work, this was definitely not a coincidence. In other words, Phantom Lord already knew that Raxus would be involved in this mission. Therefore, in order to deal with Raxus, he sent Moglia, who was also proficient in lightning magic, to lead the team. The other party had long wanted to deal with Fairy Tale. Thinking of this, Laxus's face became somewhat heavy. On the other side, looking at Laxus, whose body was still flashing with golden arcs of lightning and extraordinary magic, Moglia's face turned ugly. Laxus' guess was indeed correct, Moglia's appearance was specifically to deal with Laxus. However, Moglia originally thought that dealing with a 15-year-old brat would not be too difficult, even if it was not easy. He did not expect that after exchanging a blow with him, not only did he not fall into a disadvantageous position, but he also did not seem to be using his full strength. How could he lose to a 15-year-old brat? Don't joke around. Moglia let out a roar of jealousy and unwillingness, and roared at the surrounding magic shooters of Phantom Lord. Kill them all. Oh 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 oh. The magic shooters of the Phantom Lord immediately yelled out. They did not care that the other party was only 3 underage children. They swarmed forward and attacked as a group. Their targets naturally included Noah and Alusha. A bunch of trash. Laxus slowly clenched his fist, and magic power and lightning suddenly burst out from Laxus's body. Die! With a furious roar, Laxus transformed into a golden bolt of lightning and charged straight at the sorcerers of Phantom Lord who were besieging him. Stop him for me! Seeing Laxus's actions, Moglia immediately shouted in a deep voice, and ordered a group of people to surround and attack Laxus, while casting a fierce gaze at Noah and Alusha in the distance. The rest of you, deal with those two brats for me. Following Moglia's shout, 3 of the weaker magic shooters of Phantom Lord who were surrounding Laxus, and were afraid of Laxus, were immediately overjoyed, and immediately rushed towards Noah and Alusha. Back off! Alusha, who knew that Noah didn't know how to use magic, shouted at Noah in a low voice, and immediately stood in front of Noah without fear. Her cold gaze shot towards the 3 magic shooters who were charging towards her, and her body curled up with traces of magic power. Change equipment. Magic power like a stream of air converged towards Alusha's small hand, causing Alusha's hand to suddenly flash with light. When the light faded away, a knight's sword with a wing-shaped guard appeared in Alusha's hand. Chapter 13. Noah didn't rush out like a male chauvinist just because he was being protected by a girl. Instead, he calmly stood at the back and looked at Alusha who suddenly had a knight's sword in her hand. Noah had already seen that Alusha's magic was a common magic used by close combat sorcerers, equipment-changing magic. It was a type of magic that could summon all kinds of weapons from a magical space. This kind of magic wasn't very rare. It could even be said that it was more common than the elemental lightning magic that Laxus knew. There were many sorcerers who used this kind of magic, and even some novice sorcerers would use this kind of magic. Of course, this didn't mean that the equipment-changing magic was weak. Noah clearly remembered that Makarov had once said that the true strength of a sorcerer who mastered the equipment-changing magic was never dependent on the magic itself, but on the person's fighting skills. To put it bluntly, the equipment change magic was just a magic that could summon a weapon from a different space. After the weapon was summoned, this magic would not be of much use. How to use the weapon in battle was something that every mage who knew how to use the equipment change magic had to consider. Therefore, there were 3 types of sorcerers who knew the equipment changing magic. 1. The weapons in the magical space had all kinds of magical effects. Sorcerers could flexibly use the effects of these magical weapons to fight. 2. Sorcerers were proficient in all kinds of fighting skills. They could skillfully use the weapons in the magical space to the point of perfection. They could fight through their own fighting skills. 3rd, the weapons in the magical alternate dimension are magical weapons with all kinds of strange effects. The sorcerer himself also has amazing combat skills. By combining the advantages of the first 2 types of weapons, he can display powerful combat strength and engage in battle. Those powerful sorcerers who could use the equipment-changing magic belonged to the 3rd type. If Alusha really wanted to be strong in the future, then sooner or later, she would have to walk the path of the 3rd type. But now, Alusha was only an 11-year-old child. She was also an orphan with no one to rely on. Naturally, it was impossible for her to have the funds to equip herself with a magical weapon. Now, the weapon in Alusha's hand was only an ordinary weapon. In this way, Alusha wanted to use the outfit-changing magic in battle, except for the 2nd type, there was no other possibility. Not to mention the extent to which Alusha's equipment-changing magic could be used, whether or not she had mastered the basic combat skills and was proficient in using weapons was a problem. Would Alusha be able to fight? Noah's worries were quickly dispelled by Alusha's actions. Huff! Alusha, who was holding her knight's sword, let out a shout and fiercely swung her sword in the direction of the 3 Phantom Lord sorcerers who were charging towards her. Clang! A sword ray flashed across the space in front of them. The sword in Alus's hand seemed to have turned into light and collided heavily with the weapons of the Phantom Lord's magic shooters. Clang! The sound of metal clashing was accompanied by sparks. Alusha and the three sorcerers all took a step back. Impossible! Seeing that their attack was actually blocked by a brat who they didn't even take seriously, and even caused the three of them to take a step back, the three sorcerers' hearts were filled with shock. Huff! Alusha's beautiful face was also flushed red. Her gaze was fixed on the three sorcerers in front of her. Knowing that her opponents had underestimated her from the start, Alusha once again let out a delicate shout. She tightened her grip on her knight's sword and took a step forward. The distance between her and the three sorcerers was instantly shortened. Her eyes revealed a fierceness that a child would never have. Her knight's sword slashed, and the sharp sword light flashed in front of her. Poochie! The three sorcerers who were still in shock only felt a pain in their chests, and a burst of dark red blood appeared in front of them. Ah! In the next moment, screams echoed in the air. Seeing that a huge wound had appeared on the chest of the three sorcerers, and dark red blood flowed freely in front of the three sorcerers. Not only was Mowgli shocked, even Noah was shocked. His worries were completely unfounded. Although Alusha didn't seem to be equipped with a magical weapon, her combat skills were extremely skillful. She was not inferior to the average sorcerer swordsman. In addition, the three sorcerers of Phantom Lord were not only the weakest in the group, but also underestimated the enemy. It wasn't strange for them to be defeated in an instant. It seemed that Alusha was the same as him. Even though she was still young, her training was not as lax as the average child. The difference was that Noah trained his control of mana, which couldn't be used in battle. On the other hand, Alusha trained her swordsmanship, which was more than enough to be used in battle. Alusha, so she was actually this strong. Noah clenched his fists tightly. He was looking forward to learning magic in the future. How is this possible? Seeing the three sorcerers on his side fall to the ground and unable to get up, looking at Alusha who was holding her knight's sword in front of him, with a face full of awe-inspiring heroism, and thinking of Noah's unbelievably strong mana and Laxus's formidable strength, Mowgli's face began to distort. One was 15 years old. Two were 11 years old. At such a young age, there was already a child who could fight to a standstill with him, a child who could defeat three magic shooters in an instant, and a child who possessed magic that even he feared. Was the talent of a fairy tale child so outstanding to such an extent? If these three kids were allowed to grow up, in the future, Fairy Tale and Phantom Lord would definitely become enemies with each other. These three kids would definitely become Phantom Lord's most frightening enemies. He absolutely couldn't let them grow up. For the first time, real killing intent rose in Mowgli's heart. Go to hell, little brat. His whole body surged with violent electricity. With a low roar, Mowgli's body turned into a bolt of lightning and flashed in the direction of Alusha. Be careful. Although Mowgli's action was too sudden, Noah, with his superb sensing ability, was still able to sense the mana on the other side and quickly warned him. Alusha, who had just swung her sword, didn't even have time to catch her breath when she heard Noah's words. Her expression turned serious as she raised her head and looked at the bolt of lightning. She clenched her teeth and charged forward instead of retreating. The knight's sword in her hand pierced towards the incoming bolt of lightning without any fancy moves. Seeing that Alusha didn't retreat and instead launched an attack, Mowgli's mouth revealed a hint of disdain. His body that had turned into a bolt of lightning suddenly stagnated, allowing his body to appear abruptly. When the knight's sword was less than a meter away from him, his palms suddenly popped out and bent into a claw shape. An astonishing amount of electricity flashed on the surface of the claw as he grasped the incoming knight's sword. Ding! In a crisp sound, the sharp knight's sword was directly held in Mowgli's hand that was flashing with electricity, unable to move. Alusha's expression changed slightly. She tried to pull the knight's sword back, but the opponent's hand was like a giant pincer, holding the sharp knight's sword tightly in his hand, not allowing the sword to move an inch. In the end, you're still a little brat. Coldly looking at Alusha, who was clenching her teeth and trying to pull the knight's sword, Mowgli suddenly clenched his other hand. His hand flashed with violent electricity as he heavily punched Alusha's knight's sword. Clang! A violent force suddenly erupted from the knight's sword and shook Alusha, who was holding the knight's sword. Chapter 14. Clang! Amid the extremely loud sound of steel colliding, Alusha's petite body retreated violently, her feet grinding out a long gully on the ground. She didn't stop until she was in front of Noah, and a look of pain appeared on her face. Upon closer inspection, Alusha's hand that was holding the knight's sword was hanging down powerlessly as if it was fractured. Blood flowed out from her palm and dripped down along the sharp blade of the knight's sword. Alusha! Noah stepped forward and supported Alusha's slender back. There was finally a trace of anxiousness in his tone. Are you all right? I'm fine. Alusha gritted her teeth and straightened her body. Her gaze was still locked onto Mowgli's sinister face. She took a deep breath and pointed her knight's sword at Mowgli from afar. Her expression was filled with determination. Come! Following the cold shout, mana began to slowly rise from Alusha's body. It was like a visible colored fog that wrapped around Alusha. Even the ordinary knight's sword in her hand was wrapped in a layer of dim light. Feeling the mana rising from Alusha's body, Mowgli's sinister face became even more unsightly. Even Noah's face showed a trace of surprise. The mana rising from Alusha's body wasn't very strong. At least, compared to Noah's, it was worlds apart. It was also far from Laxus's, but it was enough to match a mature magic shooter's. An 11-year-old little girl's strength was comparable to a mature magic shooter's? One could only imagine how strong Alusha would be when she truly matured. Good! 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 Mowgli shouted in anger. Today, I'd like to see how far you little brats can go. Ha! In response to Mowgli's angry shout, Alusha only responded with a delicate shout. Her body's mana surged. Soon after, her body turned into an afterimage and violently rushed out. Mowgli sneered. He clenched his fist and a dense electric light flashed. It flowed on Mowgli's huge fist like a glove made of thunder and lightning, flashing extremely violently. At the same time, the knight's sword in his hand flashed like lightning. He suddenly raised the knight's sword in his hand and ferociously chopped down at Mowgli's head. Looking at the knight's sword that suddenly chopped down, Mowgli's fist that was suffused with electric light also fiercely struck out. The fist's shadows flew and filled Alusha's vision. Clang, 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 clang. In the blink of an eye, several fist shadows directly smashed onto the knight's sword. Every time a fist shadow landed on the knight's sword, there would be an intense sound of metal colliding in the air. Moreover, the mana shrouding the knight's sword would also weaken a little, and its strength would also decrease by several folds. Just like this, in a short moment, dozens of fist shadows smashed onto the knight's sword, causing the mana and strength flowing on the knight's sword to be directly shaken away. This caused Alusha's full-strength attack to become weak and self-defeating. There was no threat to speak of. I'll let you see, a brat like you definitely can't have the strength of a truly powerful magic shooter. Mowgli sneered. His clenched fist directly opened, and his hand that was flashing with electric light once again forcefully grabbed onto the knight's sword. With a forceful tug, he pulled Alusha's petite body over. Before Alusha could react, Mowgli's body suddenly leaned forward. His other hand that was flashing with electric light clenched into a fist, and with a ferocious force and a sonic boom that caused the air to fluctuate, he heavily smashed towards Alusha's body. Looking at the momentum of this fist, if it really landed on Alusha's body, even if Alusha was wearing armor, she would still end up seriously injured and unconscious. Alusha's eyes slowly widened. A shadow of death suddenly emerged from Alusha's heart and shrouded Alusha's heart. Pang! Poochie! In this space, a muffled sound and the sound of spitting out blood sounded at the same time. The muffled sound was continuous and reverberated in the air like an echo, and it was accompanied by the thick sound of electric current that didn't disperse for a long time. The sound of spitting out blood brought along with it dark red blood that sprayed into the sky. Following that, it dripped bit by bit onto the ground, forming a small pool of blood. As for Mowgli, who caused all of this, his expression changed drastically as he looked at the small figure in front of him. Alusha held the knight's sword in her hand and half knelt on the ground. She raised her head and stared blankly in front of her, her eyes full of waves. She saw that a small figure had unknowingly inserted between Alusha and Mowgli. It stood in front of Alusha with its back facing Alusha. On the figure's left shoulder, Mowgli's fist that was flashing with electric light still landed on it, charring the skin there. However, the owner of the figure also reached out a hand and tightly grasped the fist that landed on his left shoulder. Ignoring the electric light that was still flashing on it, he raised his head. In the next moment, a face with traces of blood at the corner of his mouth and dark eyes that were as deep as the stars was imprinted in Mowgli's eyes. Impressively, it was Noah. Noah suddenly stepped forward and helped Alusha take a blow from Mowgli. Brat! Even Mowgli couldn't help but cry out at this moment. Do you want to die? Die? With traces of blood at the corner of his mouth, undoubtedly, he suffered an extremely heavy blow. His left shoulder was still suffering from the electric shock from Mowgli's fist. Even his hand that was clenched on that fist emitted a burnt smell from the electric shock. However, Noah's face didn't show any signs of pain. He stared at Mowgli and grinned. Isn't this what you want? Do you really want to die? Mowgli was angered by Noah's smile. What can a brat like you who doesn't know magic do? I really don't know magic. Noah's eyes sharpened as he suddenly raised his small fist. But I'm not so bad that I don't even know how to smash my fist into the face in front of me. After saying this, Noah grabbed Mowgli's arm that landed on his left shoulder. Imitating Mowgli's action, he pulled forcefully pulled the panicked and unprepared Mowgli in front of him. Pang! Immediately, a small but abnormally powerful blow landed heavily on Mowgli's face. Ah! Mowgli screamed as his body fell. He covered his face and rolled on the ground without a care for his image. Paw! Noah's body went limp as he knelt on the ground on one knee. He covered his left shoulder and left arm that were charred by the electric shock. His small face finally showed signs of pain. As he covered his left shoulder and left arm, the hand that had just punched Mowgli was still dripping with blood. This proved that Noah had used a lot of strength in that punch. Noah! Noah! Alusha came back to her senses and hurriedly went forward to support Noah, whose face was full of pain. For the first time, panic appeared on her delicate face. Are you okay? I'm fine. Noah forced a smile with his pale face. It's just a little painful, you. Looking at Noah's pained and pale face, Alusha's expression changed several times. She couldn't help but say this. Why did you save me? Why? Noah looked at Alusha. We're all friends. What's the reason for saving your life? Didn't you just stand in front of me to protect me? Don't tell me you have a reason. We're companions from the same guild. Noah smiled slightly. Under the contrast of his pale face, it was extremely dazzling. Grandfather said before that we must cherish our companions. Alusha's one eye that was exposed couldn't help but flicker. Finally, she nodded her head heavily. Her cold heart finally had a trace of warmth. However, the crisis was not over yet. Despicable brat. Mowgli, who was covering his face, struggled to get up from the ground. His face was distorted as he roared. "I'm going to kill you." After speaking, Mowgli turned into lightning and swept toward Noah and Alusha. Chapter 15. Mowgli, who had turned into a bolt of lightning, dashed towards Noah and Alusha, who were kneeling on the ground. Noah and Alusha's expressions changed at the same time. They wanted to dodge, but Noah's injuries were not light at all. Even if he wanted to get up, it would take a lot of time. There was no way he could make it in time. Looking at Noah, who was sweating profusely and struggling to get up, Alusha gritted her teeth and leaped in front of Noah without hesitation. She raised the knight's sword in her hand and pointed it towards the bolt of lightning. Just as Mowgli, who had transformed into a bolt of lightning, was about to reach Noah and Alusha, another bolt of lightning suddenly flashed from the side. With a sharp sound, it fiercely collided with Mowgli's body. Dong! Like an explosion, a violent shockwave shook the two bolts of lightning that collided with each other. The shockwave spread out and swept in all directions, setting off thick smoke and strands of electric current that wandered back and forth aimlessly. "Get down!" Noah hurriedly pulled Alusha, who was blocking in front of him, over and pressed her down with force. Together, they lay on the ground. The shockwave wreaked havoc over the heads of the man and woman lying on the ground. The electric current that wandered back and forth also scattered in all directions. The shockwave didn't hit Noah and Alusha, who were lying on the ground, in time. Only the thick smoke blew past and covered Noah and Alusha's bodies. After an unknown amount of time, the shockwave, the wanton electric current, and the thick smoke gradually disappeared. Noah and Alusha, who were lying on the ground, slowly raised their heads and looked forward. They saw that Mowgli, whose face was filled with murderous intent, was now like a chicken that had lost its ability to resist. A strong and powerful hand was choking his neck and lifting him in the air. His legs couldn't help but kick as his face gradually turned purple. The one who was choking Mowgli's neck and lifting Mowgli in the air was Laxus, whose body was flashing with golden electric arcs. Ha! Laxus first glanced at Noah and Alusha, who were lying not far away, then turned his gaze towards Mowgli, who was struggling in pain. He sneered out loud, but his eyes became colder and colder. "Sorry to trouble you to take care of my two brats." "You." Morgalia felt that it was getting more and more difficult for him to breathe. His chest started to hurt as he hugged Lax's hand that was strangling his neck. "You. How did you? Are you wondering why I can help?" Laxus had an unrestrained expression on his face. "You want to stop me? Shouldn't you find a few more important people?" Hearing this, Noah, Alusha, and Mowgli suddenly woke up and turned their heads at the same time to look at their surroundings. Just as the three of them expected after hearing Laxus's words, the surrounding magic shooters from the Phantom Lord, who had besieged Laxus, were now lying on the ground with light smoke and traces of electric arcs all over their bodies. They let out messy and subtle cries, obviously unable to stand up. "You." Mowgli's eyes widened as he looked at Laxus, who was laughing maniacally with an expression of disbelief. Although these magic shooters from the Phantom Lord were not stronger than Mowgli, and they were all magic shooters from the Phantom Lord branch, they were still stronger than some ordinary magic shooters. If one or two of such magic shooters went up against Mowgli, they would only be looking for trouble. Mowgli could easily deal with 3 or 4 of them, but if 10 of them went up against him together, even Mowgli would start to struggle. If all 30 of them went up against him together, even Mowgli wouldn't dare to say that he could win. However, Laxus won, and it seemed that he did not even suffer a single injury. How is this possible? Could it be that this Laxus was still hiding his strength? Doesn't that mean that he is much stronger than me? But isn't he only 15 years old? How can he be so much stronger than me at 15 years old? What a terrifying person. Moglia finally felt fear. So strong. Alusha stared blankly at the magic shooters from Phantom Lord, who were wailing on the ground. The way she looked at Laxus also changed. Is this the true strength of the president's grandson? Alusha estimated that if she were to go against Laxus now, she was afraid that she would not even be able to withstand a single blow. Laxus is really too strong. It was no wonder that when Makarov announced the executors of the mission and mentioned that Laxus would also be participating, the magic shooters in the Fairy Tale Guild were collectively clamoring and were no longer worried that there would be any problems with this mission. Are all the magic shooters in Fairy Tale of this level? Alusha completely overturned her original impression of Fairy Tale in her heart and began to take Fairy Tale seriously. Only Noah was holding his injured left shoulder and left arm. Looking at Laxus, who was flashing with electricity, his expression gradually became dignified. From the beginning, Noah had sensed that Laxus's magic was a little special, as if it was hiding something. Now, looking at the electric arcs flashing on Laxus's body, Noah was sure that this lightning was different from the lightning that Laxus had used before. There must be another power hidden in Laxus's body. Moreover, this power was very strong. It was by relying on this power that Laxus was able to defeat the magic shooters of Phantom Lord, and take down Moglia in an instant. Otherwise, based on the strength that Laxus had originally displayed, he would at most be on the same level as Moglia. What exactly was hidden in Laxus's body? While Noah was deep in thought, Laxus looked at the terrified Moglia and laughed sinisterly. Then, it's your turn next. No. Wait, Moglia was just about to beg for mercy when a burst of violent electricity flowed mercilessly into his body from the arm that was choking his neck, continuously attacking him. Ah! A blood-curdling scream echoed in the surroundings. Pang! Not long after, the charred and smoking Moglia was thrown to the ground by Laxus. Not only was he seriously injured, but he was also completely unconscious. Didn't I say that? Laxus curled his lips in disdain. I won't give you the chance to kneel and apologize. Noah. On the other side, Alusha helped Noah up. Can you still stand up? I'm okay. Noah smiled bitterly as he forced himself to stand up. However, he still needed Alusha's support, otherwise, he would have collapsed. After this incident, you should understand, right? Laxus walked over and sneered as he looked at Noah's charred left shoulder and left arm. Without power, you can't do anything. Noah was suddenly silent. Although Noah did not think that Laxus was right, Laxus's words were not absolutely wrong. At the very least, in that situation earlier, without strength, Noah did not even have the qualifications to fight. He could only be protected. At most, he could step forward bravely, block a blow for the others, and give some unexpected and harmless attacks. That was all. Without learning magic, it was still too difficult to deal with a sorcerer. It was easy to deal with an ordinary sorcerer, but for an opponent like Moglia, it was hard to say. Become stronger. Laxus looked deeply at his brother in front of him. Only by becoming stronger can you do what you want to do, no matter what it is. The scene was silent. Chapter 16. Magnolia. In a room on the top floor of the Fairy Tale Guild, Makarov looked at Noah, who was lying on the bed, gritting his teeth as he endured the pain. His expression did not change in the slightest, but his eyes, which were full of wrinkles, had an undetectable anxiety. Polyusia, are you still not done? Makarov was speaking to an old woman who was standing beside Noah's bed, helping Noah's left shoulder and left arm to bandage. Shut up and watch. The old woman named Polyusia's expression did not change as she continued with the work at hand and responded with a sarcastic tone. If you make any more noise, I'm going back. Makarov immediately shut his mouth and did not dare to speak again. Because Makarov knew that Polyussia would definitely do what she said. Although the two of them were close friends who had known each other for many years, Polyussia hated humans very much. To Polyussia, the noisy and lively fairy tale was definitely one of the places she did not want to be in the most. If it were not for the fact that Noah was injured and Makarov's thick skin caused a ruckus in Polyussia's house, even if Noah was on the verge of death, Polyussia would not have come to fairy tale. Even if she came now, she would definitely be in a bad mood. If he continued to provoke Polyussia, Makarov knew that Polyussia would definitely leave without another word. Perhaps it was because she really could not bear to see Makarov's secretly anxious appearance. Polyussia sighed. You're already so old, yet you're still so impatient. Although your grandson's injury can't be considered light, it didn't hurt his bones. With the help of healing magic, he'll be able to recover in less than 3 days. Why are you so anxious? Really? Makarov heaved a sigh of relief. That's great. Thank you, Granny. Noah, who was lying on the bed, also hurriedly expressed his gratitude. I've really troubled you. Don't misunderstand, I just couldn't stand that old man's shameless torture. Polyussia helped Noah with the bandage expressionlessly and then got up without any reluctance. If it wasn't for this, I would definitely not come to this place filled with hateful humans. Hearing this, not only did Noah bitterly laugh, but even Makarov was helpless. Anyway, thank you. Don't say any more useless words. Polyussia turned around and walked out. If you really want to thank me, then don't look for me in this place. Leaving these words, Polyussia directly slammed the door and left. Anyone could feel the displeasure in her heart. How old is she already, yet she still hates humans so much? Makarov curled his lips and looked in the direction of promise. Seeing Noah's relaxed expression and the bandaged left shoulder and left arm, his eyes were filled with regret. I'm sorry, Noah. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go on this mission. Grandpa, what are you saying? Noah waved his uninjured arm nonchalantly. No one knew that Phantom Lord would suddenly appear, right? That's not your fault, Grandpa. Don't worry. Noah. Makarov clenched his fists, his old eyes showing traces of coldness. This debt, I'll get it back from Joseph sooner or later. And Laxes. The coldness in his eyes turned into anger. Makarov angrily shouted out. Before I left, I specifically ordered him to protect you, but in the end, you suffered such a serious injury. When we get back, I'll teach him a lesson. Brother Laxes. Noah couldn't help but recall the words Laxes said to him. After a moment of silence, he couldn't help but speak. Grandpa, tell me, is it really wrong for me to not learn magic? When the somewhat angry Makarov heard this, his expression slightly froze. Looking at the blank expression of his grandson lying in front of him, a feeling of tenderness emerged in his heart. Having adopted Noah for a whole year, Makarov understood Noah better than anyone else. Naturally, he also knew that his grandson often displayed a calmness that even normal adults would not be able to display when facing outsiders or certain situations. Furthermore, he did not have the impulsiveness that youth had, and his temperament was excellent in all aspects. However, no matter how excellent Noah was, he was only an 11-year-old child. In his heart, there was naturally a weakness that a child should have. However, this weakness in Noah's heart was only shown in front of the people closest to him. For example, in front of him. You didn't learn magic because of my orders. Even if it's wrong, it's still my fault. After a moment of silence, Makarov responded. But Noah, I can tell you, this decision of yours is definitely not wrong. Makarov's words were like a ray of light that illuminated Noah's heart, which was full of confusion. Noah's eyes lit up, and he turned his head to look at Makarov. Your talent is really too good. Even if you did not go through special training, you were born with powerful magic that no one can match. If you can freely control this magic and learn magic, in the future, you will definitely have more power than me. Makarov said solemnly. But sometimes, too powerful a talent brings about more than just simple benefits. This is especially reflected in your case. Before you can freely control all your magic, learning magic, even if it is a healing or auxiliary magic that does not have any power, may cause the magic that is not completely under control to break free from control when you use it, and then go berserk. That is very dangerous. In any case, your talent will not escape, and the magic that belongs to you will not disappear. So why are you in a hurry to learn magic? Makarov's voice began to soften. You are still young, and you have to work hard every day to control your magic. Sooner or later, this magic that belongs to you will be completely controlled by you, and you will be able to use it completely. When that time comes, it won't be too late to learn magic. And with the strength of your magic, once you learn magic, your power will definitely grow incomparably fast. Listening to Makarov's advice, the confusion in Noah's heart finally dissipated, but there were still some things that he could not let go of. I understand that, but this time, when we met the Phantom Lord, if I knew magic, I would be able to protect my companions, right? What are you talking about? Makarov grinned. I have already heard about what happened from Alusha. Didn't you protect Alusha very well? That's called protection. Noah frowned. I only blocked a blow for Alusha. You didn't let Phantom Lord's people hurt their own companions. That's protection. Makarov said as he gently patted Noah's thin shoulders and stared at Noah's face. If you really want to pursue power, then I will not force you. But I hope that you can choose the right way to obtain power. The right way to obtain power. Noah did not understand. Magic is not the only thing that counts as power. Makarov said meaningfully. Isn't Alusha the same? Other than training her magic, she is also training her swordsmanship at the same time, right? Noah immediately understood what Makarov meant, and his heart suddenly became clear. I believe that you will definitely be able to walk down the correct path of magic that belongs to you. Looking at Noah's gradually brightening expression, Makarov said with relief. Until then, no matter what, Grandpa will protect you. Noah took a deep breath and hid his gratitude towards Makarov deep in his heart. He nodded heavily and looked out the window, his expression slowly becoming firm. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.